This is Jake Seeley, and I'm the blown ACL that ruins your football season.
Good news, everyone! Let's get dangerous.
This is so cool!
I know!
It feels so right! It's Jake Seeley.
I'm sorry, who is this?
Nice try, Moonman. Pretending not to know. Earth's greatest mastermind!
You just made the list!
I thought you said that was a myth.
Just because it's a myth doesn't mean it's not true.
If you all blindly follow my plan, we may have a chance.
Sure, we talk about it all the time.
Really?
No, burn.
Game on, you Ducks. Hopefully you came out of week 6 healthier in your fantasy team than a lot of these players at this point, because they are dropping like flies. Man, how about for a one-and-done fantasy football league next year? I don't think it'll take over as the main one, but we need to make this happen. We need to find a site that could do that for us. One and done, everybody. New way to play. Or new, better way to also play while you still have your normal redraft home leagues. But anyway, you can hear that sigh of consternation. Let's talk about news in general. And I want to say something right off the top. It's like, I'm sorry. So our jobs in the fantasy analyst world, whatever you want to call us, we're trying to parse through all the information, watching the games, getting the news, reading the beat reports, going through the analytics, yada, yada, yada. Like all the stuff we do. We try to parse it all down for you, like for a podcast and articles, so you can get the quick hit information and make your lineup decisions. We sometimes just give you the straight answer, sometimes try to help you make the decision. It still comes down to you, and that's not to pass the buck. And I'm saying all that to say is that I'm not passing the buck from what we're told and what we do, but sometimes these things happen. It was a miserable week for information. We were told Hassan Haskins was the lead. We sat here last Monday and Tuesday, went through waivers. I had Vidal ahead of Hassan Haskins and was going off the fact that the explosiveness in the passing game, not an immense amount, but there's some, more than Haskins. And then everything throughout the week is, Haskins is the lead. They're signing Nyheim Hines, as I brought up on one of the shows. The Cardinals, Michael Carter coming off a game where he was the lead. And then all of a sudden, Zonovan Knight, he's going to be the lead. Juwan Jennings, he'll be good to go for the game. He's playing at 4 o'clock. And then he's active. He's good to go. Oh, by the way, we hear from Juwan Jennings after the game. 5 broken ribs and 17 ankle injuries going on. So I'm saying all that to say is, I'm sorry. We're doing the best we can. We were given the information we give, so sometimes that's why I say it's ultimately your team, your call, and I'm not being smarmy with that, is that even when we have the best information, it's wrong. And, so like the Vidal situation, I think just argue, say, hey, you know what? Stick with my gut next time. That's why I tell some people like you guys to stick with your gut. If your gut is telling you to go one way or another, you might have seen something or heard something that just stuck with you. But anyway, that's just the things that happen in fantasy football. That's the NFL. Look at the random dude that I can't remember his name that scored a touchdown yesterday, where the entire football world went, is this a real person, or did they just create a player from Madden mid-game and put him on the field? I know there's a hyphen in his name. I still can't even remember because it sounded so plain. It was like 3 super common names. Maybe I could think of it by the end of the show. But anyway, let's talk Kimani Vidal. Going forward, I'd still call him a fringe RB2. Not going to get much better than facing the Dolphins. There is a tougher schedule coming forward. It's hit or miss. It's not completely awful. But Vidal is going to cede some touches to Haskins. There's still the chance that the Chargers trade for somebody or bring somebody off the street. Again, in addition to Hines to be more of a complementary piece. This is a playoff contending team. I'm not sure even with that game that they're sold that Vidal is the answer. So watch for that. And like I said, I won't go crazy if he's still out there. You do need to pick him up. He can be an RB2, especially with buys, but probably about the ceiling. For the Cardinals situation, that's looking like it's going to be more of a 50-50 split with Michael Carter and Zonovan Knight. But the thing here is that Knight wasn't as involved until DeMario got banged up. So if DeMario is missing time, that's where you get your 50-50 split. If not, this is going to be mostly Carter, because the report as that one was off and it was Carter. Until the one thing I will say Knight does seem to have is the trust of the Cardinals inside the 5-yard line. He's going to get the goal line carries. So Michael Carter kind of in that old Matt Forte role, but a much lesser version of Matt Forte. But you might be able to get Knight as a desperation, or they're both RB3s if DeMario is out. Carter, high-end RB3 if DeMario is back, with Knight being more of a 4 to kind of give you that idea. And then Juwan Jennings, good. I had him ranked as a fringe wide receiver too, because he was supposed to be fine. And Juwan Jennings is the number one and is the guy when he's been out there with Ricky Pearsall. Can you tell I'm frustrated because I started him in some leagues? The answer now is that you can't even start Juwan Jennings, which you know what this means. He's going to go have 100 yards and a touchdown. Kendrick Bourne was back. The big question here is if Pearsall is back. I think it's going to be Pearsall and Bourne, but the Bourne with Jennings still just being on the field, obviously mostly a decoy, but he's still going to be out there. Hurts Bourne a little bit. So if there is no Pearsall next week, Bourne, he is the wide receiver too. There's a connection with Mac Jones. If Brock Purdy comes back, maybe more of a little bit dicey of a wide receiver too, in the fact that does Purdy use him as much? If Pearsall's back, it's a whole cluster, and Pearsall and Bourne will be wide receiver 3s. Again, I don't know how he can trust Jennings at this point, playing through the ribs and the ankles and everything going on. But again, that probably just means 110 yards and another touchdown for Kendrick Bourne, because that's what this season is. More injuries. Actually, in that same game, Emeka Egbuka hurt his hamstring going for an MRI. Seems like he's probably going to miss this week. The big question here is they have a week 9 bye. So do they hold Egbuka out 7, 8, and then the bye, and we don't see Egbuka till week 10? Is Mike Evans going to be back? Situation to watch. If there is no Egbuka and no Mike Evans, the Johnsons, Tez and Cameron Johnson, come into play. I would give Tez Johnson the higher ceiling. Cameron Johnson looks to be more of the floor play between the two. Both of them are going to be wide receiver 3-4s at best, 3s at best, probably more 4s, just because the beneficiary will likely be Cade Otton in the backfield, and Baker Mayfield is kind of pulling his Josh Allen from week to week when it's not Egbuka. Like, everybody but the big names is kind of Baker Mayfield, Josh Allen. He's going to go to whoever's open. He's going to throw it around and mix it around, so they'll all be risky. Speaking of mixing things around, and another frustration point, going back to now Sunday morning, man, Troy Franklin had a better game if not for the callback plays. You know what? I'm calling that a win, as Troy Franklin is the wide receiver 4 with more upside, skirting on that wide receiver 3, because he had it. Just the dang plays taken away from him. But the one thing that I did notice is that Pat Bryant did see an uptick and was out there in some 2 wide receiver sets. Patrick Bryant, the rookie, drafted, but this is, once again, Sean Payton being Sean Payton, and Sean Payton's going to frustrate. I'm not saying go pick up Pat Bryant outside of deeper leagues as a stash. Maybe he starts to see an uptick and gets past Mims and starts knocking on the Troy Franklin door, but it went as bad as it possibly could for Justin Fields, as you know. And when I said you ride with the good with the bad, this is one of the weeks where I said, yeah, maybe you could. I still had him as a high quarterback too. It was nowhere near that, but I will have him as a fringe QB1 in a good matchup again, because that is Justin Fields. He doesn't face the Broncos again. That's the good news. But as the bad news is, that's what could happen. Although I will say Justin Fields becomes more risky if Garrett Wilson is banged up and out. Speaking of banged up and out now, another one, Puka Nacua. Highly questionable for this week as they travel overseas. It sounds like Puka Nacua likely to miss that game, which means Jordan Whittington is up. Jordan Whittington was already ahead of Tutu Atwell. Kind of gimmicky wide receiver situation for Tutu Atwell. But the big plays were there, but Whittington would be the number 2. Wide receiver 4 range, maybe wide receiver 3. Kanata Mumfield got sprinkled in a little bit, the rookie that they drafted. But this is one where Matthew Stafford maybe just throws a little bit more to the tight ends, which no, I'm not chasing any one of those 17 options that he has. But Whittington would be in play. It looks like Nacua, like I said, probably out. Isaiah Likely, if you're stashing players with the Mark Andrews rumors, if he gets traded, I can see that happening, especially with the Ravens needing everything they can during this bye for Lamar Jackson to come back and hopefully get back to the winning ways. So Isaiah Likely would immediately be a top 10 tight end if Mark Andrews got cleared out. Jaden Blue for the Cowboys, just a handcuff. Like, there was talk, and I know there was talked up by Stephen Ross and everything like that. It's nothing more than the Javonte Williams backfield. There'll be a sprinkle, maybe a little bit more for Blue, but there's no way you can use him. But if something happened to Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders on the IR, there's your upside there. Revenge game on the other side for Rico Dowdle. Sell high, obviously. If anybody's giving you RB1 value, I do think this is forcing the Panthers' hand to timeshare and split this backfield 50-50 with Chuba Hubbard back. They love some Chuba Hubbard, but there's no denying what Dowdle has done for this past 2 weeks. So again, if you can only get fringe RB2 value for Dowdle, well, then you just keep him on the upside that maybe he has the lead even when Hubbard comes back. And Hubbard could be a decent buy low if he doesn't, but you kind of get where I'm going with those. Marvin Harrison has a concussion for the Cardinals. That situation is one where, again, I'd probably avoid even with Jacoby Brissett passing a little bit better than Kyler Murray, because Michael Wilson's banged up but playing through it. Zay Jones came back from an injury, and there's some upside there. And then, of course, Greg Dortch, but mostly McBride in the backfield. They're just one of those messy situations where Hopefully Marvin Harrison doesn't miss too much time, if this week at all. For the Jaguars, Travis Hunter, finally the number 2 wide receiver, and opportunities out there going forward. So maybe he can get to the wide receiver 4 conversation if he was dropped or if he's just been holding on. Might be able to start him going forward. For the Patriots, Kayshon Boutte showed up again. He's been running as the top 2 wide receiver. I'm not expecting Kayshon Boutte to do this again. Boutte he did double up his touchdowns. Now he's at 3. He had 1 before that. DeMario Douglas, the best game of the year. Not expecting that either. This is kind of a buy low situation for Stephon Diggs, coming off 2 games where he was the clear one in opportunities, and I think he'll bounce back. So look for that. Still no Travion Henderson in that backfield. I am not dropping him, but as I mentioned last week in waivers, he is no more than a handcuff. The Patriots do not want to use anybody but Stevenson. For the Browns, David Njoku hurt, speaking of tight ends, so if Harold Fannin was dropped and out there, go grab him right back, because similar to likely, that situation's been cleared up, assuming that Njoku is going to miss some time. Fannin will be in the tight end 1 conversation with no Njoku, even with Dylan Gabriel at quarterback. Maybe we get some Shador Sanders at some point. What else do we got? The Steelers, Warren and Gainwell splitting. Actually, we saw a little bit of Caleb Johnson for the first time really getting involved, but headache of a backfield. Warren, Gainwell, RB3s. That's just what we're going to have to face going forward. Warren going to be ranked ahead because of his ability, and they do trust him a little bit more. Another running back situation with the Titans, Tony Pollard ceding more carries to Tajay Spears. So if he's still floating out there, or if you had him, Spears, I would expect to start eating in more and more, especially our already see in the passing game. Calvin Ridley was hurt in that game, which would just mean you can trust IU Manor. If Calvin Ridley does miss time. More injuries. Dontavian Wicks hurt for the Packers, which is why you saw so much of Matthew Golden. If Christian Watson returns this week, they opened his window. He would step right back out there, that outside wide receiver spot, which would hurt the Golden excitement. If Watson's not back and Wicks is out, then we might get some reliability and trustability to start Matthew Golden this week, but that's going to be one to watch. And if you want to stash Watson in case he is back and they throw him right back there as a top 2 option, you can go grab him. Joe Flacco got the assignment, followed through. You target 2 people, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and nobody else. That is the end. So that's good. On the bad side, Chase Brown losing more opportunities to Samaje Perine. This is not necessarily a Taj Brooks endorsement, but one that, hey, deeper league, stash him, because maybe they're just tired of Chase Brown not doing anything, thinking he's the problem. So if they do turn to him, now, I'm not expecting a lot for Brooks because he's a lot like Chase Brown, but just something in deeper leagues to take a flyer on. And then in the Sunday night game, Isiah Pacheco pulled far ahead of Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt is still going to mix in, still be frustrating. But Pacheco and the Chiefs do get somewhat of a softer schedule now. Raiders, Commanders, and Bills run game coming up. Where Isiah Pacheco, a buy low, possibly. You can go get him out there and plug him in. I don't want him more than an RB3, but possibly the opportunity is there. Good luck. If you're listening to this before Monday Night Football, hopefully if you are listening after, you had good luck in a doubleheader. There's another doubleheader next week. But next week is it for the London game and the doubleheader on Monday night, although the international games are coming back in November, as a reminder. And I'll be back on Wednesday, as a reminder. And hopefully you've survived these injuries. If not, I'm sure you're signing up for the one-and-done leagues I am trying to get started for next year.